The truth beneath the Council's lies. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council shimmered under the glow of 1,000 crystalline lights, suspended in orbit over the neutral world of Veridum Prime. The hall was a masterpiece of architecture. Floating spires of translucent alloy, walls lined with star steel filigree, and a ceiling that projected the vast cosmos in real time. Delegates from over 300 starfaring civilizations sat in their assigned places, discussing matters of trade, diplomacy, and war. At the center of the hall, standing at the polished marble dais, was Admiral James Walker of Earth, the first human ever to attain a seat of power within the Council's inner circle. 10 years ago, humanity had been welcomed as a junior member, a species still new to the grand stage of interstellar politics. Today, Walker's face was unreadable, but his grip on the datapad in his hands was tight, too tight. The information contained within it made his stomach churn with rage. The Galactic Council, the so-called beacon of peace and progress, had been lying to humanity from the very beginning. In the shadowed corridors beneath the Grand Hall, deep within a hidden secure communications room, Walker's most trusted analyst, Dr. Evelyn Carter, worked feverishly at her console. Her fingers moved in a blur, bypassing the final layers of encryption as she cracked through the Council's classified files. Lines of alien script scrolled across the holographic display, illuminating her face with a sickly green glow. Her eyes widened as she read the contents. Then her hands started shaking. Walker's voice crackled through her neural link. "Carter, what do we have?" She swallowed hard, voice tight with fury. "You need to see this." With a flick of her fingers, she transferred the data to Walker's secure terminal. A holographic projection materialized above his datapad. Walker's breath hitched. It was all there. Every last detail. The Council's secret plans for Earth. Mass genetic harvesting of the human population. Biological weapons research using live human test subjects. Systematic exploitation of Earth's resources, masked as economic partnerships. It was not diplomacy. It was domestication. They had never seen Earth as an equal. They had seen prey. Walker's pulse pounded in his ears, but outwardly he remained stone-faced. He had been trained for moments like this. He inhaled slowly. Then, in a calm, even voice, he whispered into his neural link. "Send the confirmation." Back on Earth, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, inside the hidden command center, a woman stood before an immense holographic war map, studying the flashing red indicators across the Sol system. General Emma Stone. She was a veteran of Earth's last great war, a woman whose mere presence commanded respect and fear. She had always distrusted the Council. Human history did not favor blind trust. As Walker's confirmation signal arrived, her expression did not change. She had always known this day would come. She turned to her chief officers, her voice cold as steel. "Begin Operation Dark Shield." Across the solar system, humanity's hidden defense platforms silently came online. Deep in the asteroid belts, disguised mining stations powered up their massive cannons. On the ocean floors, submerged military bunkers activated their life support systems. Humanity had played the part of the naive newcomers for far too long. They had let the Council believe Earth was defenseless. They had let them believe they were weak. Now, the truth would be revealed. The Council's final mistake. Above Veridum Prime, the Council session continued, oblivious to the fact that their carefully orchestrated plans were already collapsing. At the center of the chamber, the High Speaker, a towering alien with iridescent scales and piercing yellow eyes, stood before the assembly, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Brothers and sisters of the Galactic Council," he proclaimed, "today we reaffirm our unity, our shared prosperity, and our commitment to peace." Walker resisted the urge to laugh bitterly. Instead, he glanced around at the other Council members. Some species had been part of the Council for millennia. Their civilizations stretching back before humanity had even learned to forge iron. Some of them nodded in agreement with the High Speaker, Others remained silent, unreadable. And then there were those whose expressions were too carefully neutral. Walker narrowed his eyes. How many of them knew? How many had voted in favor of Earth's destruction? The answer didn't matter anymore, because Earth wasn't waiting for permission to defend itself. The silent war begins. 3 levels below the council chamber, in a section of the station restricted to high-ranking officials, Walker stepped into a private corridor, activating his encrypted link. Phase 1 complete, he murmured. They suspect nothing. A small, seemingly insignificant device embedded in his diplomatic badge had been secretly scanning the station's critical systems, mapping out energy grids, defense nodes, and command relay points. It had just finished transmitting the final layout to General Stone's tactical teams on Earth. Above the human homeworld, in orbit around the moon, Commander Linda Hayes stood aboard what the Council believed to be a civilian research station. She watched as the confirmation code flashed across her screen. All units, maintain current positions, she ordered. Wait for the signal. The Council would launch their attack soon. Their own encrypted communications had revealed their timetable. What they didn't know was that humanity had been listening all along. Years of paranoia and preparation, dismissed by the Council as wasteful military spending, were about to prove their worth. The calm before the storm. Back in the Council chamber, Walker stood at his assigned seat, his expression carefully neutral. The High Speaker's speech continued, droning on about galactic unity and the need for cooperation. Walker's fingers tightened around his armrest. The moment was fast approaching. The Council would soon learn the truth. The humans they had so arrogantly underestimated had never been their victims. They had never been their servants. They had been their executioners, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment was almost here. The Council's betrayal, humanity's wrath. The Galactic Council's Grand Hall was a monument to civilization, a gathering place where the most powerful species in the galaxy made decisions that shaped entire star systems. It was designed to impress and intimidate with its impossibly tall crystalline pillars, floating holographic displays of ancient treaties, and a ceiling that mirrored the stars outside. But beneath its splendor, beneath the carefully cultivated illusion of unity and peace, lay something far darker. It had taken Earth 10 years to earn a place here. 10 years of diplomacy. 10 years of technological exchange. 10 years of playing by the Council's rules. And all that time, the Council had been plotting their downfall. Admiral James Walker sat at his seat, his expression neutral as the High Speaker droned on about the glories of interstellar cooperation. The alien's voice was steady, confident. But Walker wasn't listening. He was counting down the seconds. Back on Earth, deep within the Rocky Mountain Command Center, General Emma Stone stood in the center of a massive holographic war table, watching in silence as the last data packets from Walker's infiltration streamed in. Her officers were still, watching her, waiting. Stone's face was carved from stone itself, her hands clasped behind her back. When the final confirmation appeared on the screen, she gave a single, calm nod. Initiate Ghost Protocol. Across the solar system, orders were relayed in silence. Across Mars, the asteroid belt, and hidden installations deep beneath Earth's oceans, humanity's true defenses powered up. The Council had always believed Earth's military was small, outdated, and dependent on the technology they had been given. That was their first mistake. The unveiling of the trap. On the surface of Earth's moon, what the Council believed to be a peaceful scientific research station came to life. False hulls detached, revealing a hidden armament of planetary defense cannons. In the depths of Neptune's orbit, disguised mining vessels split apart, revealing fully armed warships that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Beneath the icy crust of Europa, what had been labeled as a subsurface research facility was, in truth, a military outpost housing an entire fleet of war drones. The Council had assumed that humanity, in its infancy among the stars, had built only what it had shown. But Earth was notorious for deception. History had taught humans well. They had learned from centuries of warfare that the best defense was secrecy, and the Council had just walked into a battlefield they didn't even know existed. The Council's fatal error. Back in the Grand Hall, Walker stole a glance across the room. Most of the Council members still had no idea what was about to happen. They were comfortable in their superiority, their dominance. They had always seen humanity as a lesser species, an experiment in patience. But one delegate in particular was watching him too closely. Ambassador Kelrith of the Yalvan Dominion. A reptilian species, the Yalvan were known for their cunning, their ability to read body language with terrifying accuracy. Kelrith's slitted yellow eyes flicked to Walker's hands, the way he gripped the armrest just a little too tightly. The alien's forked tongue flickered in the air. He suspected something. Kelrith's clawed fingers tapped the console before him, and his translator chirped into Walker's earpiece. "You are far too calm, human. What have you done?" Walker did not react. He simply turned his gaze toward the main display screen in the Grand Hall, where a massive projection of the Sol system was floating for all to see. And then, at precisely 10:45 Galactic Standard Time, the illusion shattered. Before the entire Council, the Sol system map updated. New blips appeared. Hundreds of them. They hadn't been there before. Ghost fleet units. One by one, human warships that had been invisible to Council sensors revealed themselves. Fleet formations appeared out of nowhere. Weapons platforms locked onto Council assets. Orbital stations shed their disguises, revealing terrifying new weaponry. The Grand Hall erupted into chaos. Shouts, confusion, disbelief. Walker finally smiled. The betrayal unfolds. Ambassador Kelrith shot to his feet, his scaled face contorted in rage. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared. The High Speaker, once so calm and collected, now looked uncertain. His silver eyes darted across the display, watching in horror as human forces materialized across the entire solar system. Walker slowly rose to his feet, adjusting his uniform. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost bored. "Did you really think we weren't watching you?" The Grand Hall fell silent. Walker let the words sink in before continuing. 10 years. That's how long you've been lying to us. 10 years of deception, of waiting for the moment to strike. He took a step forward, locking eyes with the High Speaker. "But the thing is," Walker smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We were lying too." The High Speaker's face paled. This is a violation of galactic law." Walker chuckled, shaking his head. "Spare me the theatrics. We cracked your encrypted files. We know everything. The genetic harvesting, the biological testing, the planned subjugation of Earth." A murmur of unease spread through the Council chamber. Some delegates looked at one another in confusion. Clearly, not everyone had been in on the conspiracy. The High Speaker recovered quickly, his voice regaining its authority. "If you act against us, you will be making an enemy of the entire Galactic Council." Walker leaned in, his next words barely a whisper. "No, we are making an example of you." Earth's wrath awakens. Far above Veridan Prime, a human dreadnought decloaked. The UNS Vengeance. It was not like Council warships, sleek, elegant, designed for diplomacy as much as war. It was a monster. Thick-plated armor, redundant shield arrays, and weaponry that pulsed with unseen energy, human technology that had never been disclosed to the Council. The entire chamber shook as Veridan Prime's orbital defenses began detecting new contacts. Not just one. Hundreds. The Council's fleets, which had always believed themselves untouchable, were suddenly outnumbered. Walker turned back to the High Speaker. "We know you planned to strike first. You thought Earth was defenseless. You thought we were weak." He tilted his head. "You were wrong." The Council delegates looked at the High Speaker, but the High Speaker was no longer looking at Walker. He was looking at the display. At the UNS Vengeance, now priming its main weapon. The same realization hit every alien delegate in the room. Earth had not been their prey. It had been their executioner, waiting for the perfect moment. Walker tapped his neural link, sending a single command. Begin. The first shot was fired, and the war began, the unleashing of Earth's fury. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had never known such silence. Moments ago, it had been a place of pomp and arrogance, a gathering of the most powerful civilizations in the known universe. Now, it had become something else entirely. A courtroom awaiting its sentence. Admiral James Walker stood at the center of it all, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, scanning the panic spreading through the alien delegates like wildfire. The truth had been spoken. Earth had never been a naive newcomer to the galactic stage. It had been watching, preparing. And now, as human warships decloaked above Veridon Prime, humanity's true power was revealed. The High Speaker, once so composed, now looked as though he had aged centuries in mere seconds. His silver skin had paled, his hands gripping the edges of his podium, as though the weight of reality itself was crushing down upon him. Walker watched him struggle for words, and for the first time in 10 years, he saw something unexpected in the alien's calculating eyes. Fear. The same fear that had gripped every species throughout human history when they realized they had provoked the one species that would never bow, never submit, and never forget. The humans had learned from their history. And now, history was about to repeat itself on a galactic scale. The sound of war. The first shot came from the UNS Vengeance, the massive human dreadnought now hovering above Veridon Prime. A single blinding beam of hyper-compressed energy cut through the void of space, silently piercing the hull of the Council's primary defense station. For the briefest moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire station detonated. A fireball of blue plasma expanded outward, shockwaves rippling across the upper atmosphere of the planet below. The explosion shattered the Council's illusion of control, a declaration written in fire for all to see. Veridon's planetary defense network, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond. Dozens of defense turrets pivoted, locking onto the human warships. But it was too late. From the dark side of Veridon Prime's moon, more human ships emerged. Not a fleet. An armada. Hundreds of warships of all shapes and sizes, a force that should have been impossible for a species the Council had deemed underdeveloped. But humanity had played its hand perfectly. For 10 years, they had let the Council believe they were weak. For 10 years, they had allowed themselves to be seen as defenseless. And now, the Council would see what happened when humanity stopped pretending. The Council fractures. Inside the Grand Hall, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices rising in panic. This is an act of war. A four-armed delegate from the Threxian Empire roared. The humans have deceived us. They were deceived first. A smaller, insectoid ambassador hissed, its antennae twitching anxiously. If the reports are true, the Council was planning to. Silence. The High Speaker bellowed, but even his voice could not cut through the storm. Walker let them argue. Let them break. Because the moment the Council started turning on itself, they had already lost. The true power of humanity was never in its weapons alone. It was in its ability to divide and conquer. Earth's masterstroke. Back in the Rocky Mountain Command Center, General Emma Stone watched the chaos unfold on her holographic display. She had known this day was inevitable. Now it was time to make sure humanity controlled its outcome. Activate Phase 2, she ordered. Throughout the Council's territory, hidden human cyberwarfare units launched their second wave of attacks. Their mission: to cripple the Council's ability to communicate. Across the stars, encrypted messages began scrambling, critical defense systems were overridden, and high-ranking officials found their security systems hacked. Entire fleets were left blind and vulnerable in mere moments. The High Speaker's last gambit. Back in the Grand Hall, the High Speaker's composure finally shattered. He turned his gaze to Walker, his voice a growl. "Do you really think this will end in your favor, human?" Walker didn't answer. He simply smiled. Because the answer was already playing out in real time. Above them, in orbit, Council ships were falling apart. Some were firing blindly, unable to distinguish between allies and enemies. Others were completely defenseless, overwhelmed by the sudden loss of control over their own systems. And still, the human fleet hadn't even begun its full assault. Walker took a slow step forward, lowering his voice. "Let me be very clear, High Speaker," he said. "You were never going to win this war." The alien's jaw tightened. "And you think you are?" Walker chuckled. "No, we already did. The end of the Council's reign." The High Speaker opened his mouth to retort, but at that precise moment, the massive doors to the Grand Hall burst open. Human soldiers flooded in. They moved with terrifying precision, clad in advanced exosuits, their weapons humming with suppressed energy. The Council guards barely had time to react before they were disarmed and subdued. Walker glanced back at the High Speaker. The alien was breathing heavily, his silver skin now ashen. The sight almost made Walker pity him. Almost. Walker stepped forward and placed a single data pad on the High Speaker's podium. "This is a transmission from Earth's leadership." The High Speaker hesitated, his clawed fingers trembling as he activated the message. A hologram of General Emma Stone materialized before the Council. Her expression was cold, her voice like steel. "To the former leaders of the Galactic Council," she said, "your time is over." The room fell silent. "You sought to break humanity," Stone continued, "but you only strengthened us." Her gaze swept across the terrified delegates. "This is not a negotiation. You will surrender your power immediately. Your fleets will stand down. If you resist, we will finish what you started and erase the Council from existence." The High Speaker's breath hitched. Stone's eyes locked onto him. "The question is not whether you will fall," she said. "The question is how much of your civilization you want to save." Walker watched the weight of those words settle on the High Speaker's shoulders. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council had lost its power. And Earth, the species they had underestimated, manipulated, and sought to control, had just taken its place. The beginning of a new era. Walker exhaled slowly. The war was over before it had even begun. Earth had not simply survived the Council's betrayal. It had become the new ruling force of the galaxy. And for the first time in history, the stars belonged to humanity.